Living your life to the fullest when it feels like something is missing can be hard. Harder when that something is someone, and harder still when that someone is gone forever, yet their presence lingers. How do we carry those we've lost? Homesick is a 2019 film by Koya Kamura set 2 years post-Fukushima nuclear disaster. At the height of the conflict, over 400,000 people were displaced following the worst nuclear incident since the Chernobyl disaster. When we think of March 2011, the 9.2 magnitude earthquake, the tsunami, the near 20,000 lives lost, so much gone in 6 minutes. But like we so often do when these life-altering events no longer appear on the news, we forget that these are lived experiences that in the hearts of the living do not have a definitive end. As of last year, 30,000 people were still in temporary housing, with 2.2% of the affected area considered the difficult-to-return zone, drawing serious concerns if ever these people can or even want to return home. Despite this, Homesick's main character, Murai, fervently makes a daily pilgrimage into the no-go zone to spend time with his 8-year-old son Jun. They spend time looking for an elusive baseball and filling the requests of past residents who wish to know the state of their homes and retrieve items belonging to their loved ones. According to attachment theory, we develop emotional bonds based on observed interpretations of boundaries, trust, and conflict resolution. Ideally, we learn from our parents that they are on our side, creating a safe space where we can return should our exploration of the world prove too much. For our parents, this can become an ingrained part of their identity, sometimes at the cost of our well-being or their own. We see this through Murai, who knows how dangerous the no-go zone is. He wears a suit to combat the radiation, carries a radiation meter, and is cautious of abandoned structures. The film's main trip into the no-go zone is accompanying a woman as she lays her mother's ashes to rest, but ironically, this doesn't happen without him insisting she give up on such a dangerous notion, and him agreeing only to keep her from going in alone. His reliance on instant food also shows us how little he's taking care of himself. The woman comments on how this must be why he looks ill, unaware he's actually sick from radiation. With her, Murai, who had once loved cooking, admits now that he's alone, he sees no point. He eats to keep going, to find his son's baseball. At this point, he's kept afloat by his responsibilities as a father to his son's ghost rather than living. Yet the film is full of so much warmth that his presence isn't portrayed as something eerie, but as a natural extension of Murai's need to keep him close. The conversations between the two feel like any between a father and his young son. Murai has to explain the concept of death to Jun, who is curious about the woman's mother, discussing years before when they celebrated the Japanese custom of obon, welcoming spirits home for 3 days, wherein on the final day, lanterns float down a river as guides for their journey back to the world of the dead. Continuing bonds theory teaches us that it can be healthy to maintain an ongoing relationship with the deceased. It provides validation that though someone is no longer before you, they are not gone. A way to accept that grief is natural, but it shouldn't prevent us from moving forward with our lives after such a loss. After every trip, Murai makes a call, knowing he'll go straight to voicemail, emphasizing his need to maintain connection even when the other person isn't responding. He walks the line between accepting the loss of who he was and accepting who he's become after the Fukushima disaster. He reluctantly accepts an obon lantern from a neighbor, politely refuses an invitation from the woman, who he undoubtedly has chemistry with, to light the lanterns together, and when his son asks if his father will light a lantern for him, Murai can't answer. For most of the film, Murai holds on to his grief in the shape of his son, keeping him alive while destroying himself physically and mentally. The final scene where he brings his son a lantern shows a shift. Rather than refusing to acknowledge Jun's death, Murai honors his son's presence. This acceptance of grief sits with him on the riverbank, taking his son into himself where he'll carry him into the world so neither of them is ever alone again. Murai doesn't come to this revelation alone. The spaces he visits, the abandoned homes, the empty streets, the beach where his son draws turtles in the sand, they allow his son to speak to him. In grief, we often find ourselves returning to these memory-laden spaces, seeking connection in the geography of loss. Essentially, who we are is shaped by what we remember. Autobiographical memory is responsible for allowing us to recall specific events and experiences from our lives. These are responsible for our sense of self, but like how Murai doesn't explore the no-go zone alone, these memories are populated by the people who have made these places significant. By returning to a location associated with the lost loved one can activate vivid, emotionally charged memories. It makes the ghosts of those we've lost breathe and speak. Through them, we reach for who we were when we had them. Murai's repeated visits suggest he is trying to reconstruct his identity in the aftermath of loss. His identity as a father hasn't ended with his son's death, but he struggles with how to embody it now. Now Murai doesn't just reminisce about his son in the no-go zone, he interacts with him. This is just one example of his attempts to externalize memory to make it feel more tangible and structured. Because grief isn't simply a feeling, it's spatial. Murai records the people he's helped, the places he's searched, and the items he's retrieved in a logbook. His son guides him through the streets, by far a more legitimate resident of this desolate land than Murai. In documenting these moments, Murai is creating spaces where past and present coexist, where father and son still walk side by side. It becomes who they helped, where they looked, the items he's explained to his son. His single personal act after these adventures is making a phone call to his ex-wife that will never be answered. This suggests he's not really leaving a message for her, he's maintaining contact with a former version of himself. Each voicemail temporarily rejects closure, anchoring who he was as who he is for a moment as he gives into his guilt about growing older when his son cannot. It is in helping others that Murai discovers these spaces, however empty they may appear, are never truly abandoned. They weave a collective memory that can be shared and rediscovered through the memories of others. His son, and later the woman accompanying him on his missions of retrieval in these spaces, reminds Murai that even in the most isolated places, we never truly have to be alone in our grief. However, it can be isolating to hold on to grief long after others expect us to move on, because sympathy in the modern age seems to last as long as a news segment or a TikTok. It grows sparser as those who are unaffected by such tragedy become desensitized by the cacophony of the world's pain. There are many wrong ways to grieve, but no singular right one. Those of us who grieve silently, like Murai, protect others from being impacted, but this also prevents them from moving forward and connecting with others who may be experiencing similar feelings. According to Durkheim's collective mourning, grieving is experienced externally, not just as an individual's loss. It is made up of rituals and displays that allow people to share emotions, believing they can experience a collective healing through unity. At the beginning of Homesick, Murai won't impose his presence on others for too long. Unlike the other displaced residents who formed a makeshift town, Murai's work, retrieving items for others, is his sole attempt at communal remembrance. By meticulously recording where he's searched and what he's found for different people, he's mapping out the traces of loss left behind by his community. This record then becomes a light for Murai, guiding him through the unknown toward his own piece left behind, his son's baseball. When loss is too great to bear alone, some find comfort in carrying it for others. Such a transformation from the aggrieved to a caretaker is what researchers call post-traumatic growth, a profound shift in our identity that emerges from trauma. We see different paths to such growth in a tender moment between Murai and the woman seeking to spread her mother's ashes. Their conversation reveals their contrasting relationships with loss. She speaks of her mother in the past tense, regretting she didn't learn more of her recipes, while Murai talks about his son as if Jun and his hatred for oysters are waiting for him back at home. The woman has begun to integrate her loss into her life, while Murai remains suspended in time with his child's ghost. When she invites Murai to cook for her, this flirtation is an invitation to join her in the present, to create new memories and start again the old hobby he sacrificed in his grief. Without realizing it, Murai's role has shifted from grieving father to helping others reclaim pieces of their lives as he realizes his healing might be possible too. His initial refusal to take part in lighting a lantern isolates him, but his eventual participation, though done alone, represents his acceptance of mourning as a communal act. He begins to see that grieving can be quiet, personal, while still connecting us to something larger. That even in our most private moments, we feel less alone by participating in acts that unite us with everyone who has ever loved and lost. The final aspect of Murai's grief involves the actions of his son Jun. Homesick never treats Jun as anything ominous. He's his father's companion through the no-go zone like any carefree child tagging along with their parent on a bring your child to work day. But toward the film's end, there are 4 moments where Jun manifests his own will. These moments grow from one that lasts not even a minute, a concerned exchange when Murai's radiation meter goes off, followed by the reveal of his radiation sickness. It is the first time we see Jun's expression show anything but a smile, because Murai can lie to himself that everything is fine, but Jun increasingly suggests to his father about letting him go. The first is during their journey to bring the woman and her mother to the graveyard. Murai is talking to his son in the past tense, but it feels like a much closer past. It could have been a conversation one makes about the fun of the previous year's holiday before talking about how they will celebrate this year. Without an ounce of fear, Jun asks his father if he'll light a lantern for him. It is only when he sees how this comment has hurt his father does Jun get embarrassed. The next concerns a turtle Jun constructs of sand. Murai asks his son why does he do it with such a serious expression, to which Jun explains it's because the waves will come and wash it away. So Murai adjusts the sand, turning the creature into a sea turtle. This aligns with Murai's grief as, like his son, he's grappling with impermanence. At first, he resists letting go, but he learns that love, like the waves, don't merely destroy, it moves forward with us. Within the film, water plays 2 major roles. Erasure in the case of the tsunami took away homes, lives, and stability. However, the Obon lanterns represent remembrance, where love is placed into the water not to be lost, but as a conscious decision to be carried forward. This contrast flows heavily into the final 2 actions Jun takes for his father. After this small step forward with transforming the sea turtle, Jun decides it's time. He brings his father to an amusement park where they once spent his birthday as a happy family. Here we get the final revelation. Jun's baseball was hidden here all along, connecting back to autobiographical memory and how it often retrieves significant details when the brain is ready to process them. Murai's son guiding him there suggests that the memory was never lost. His subconscious blocked it until he could confront it. So long as the baseball was out there, Murai clung to this physical representation of his bond with his son. If we see this as Jun's ghost truly existing in the no-go zone, he knew his father wouldn't stop searching, so he gives him what he needs: a reason to leave. Finding the ball forces him to acknowledge the reality of loss, which is why his son tells him, "Take it. This is no place for the living." Because living for those who cannot isn't an act of betrayal, it is an act of love. Jun hugs his father for what he thinks will be the final time. His father tells him how much he loves him, and Jun says, "Then don't come back." This sees Murai having reached a state of closure where he agrees to have dinner with the woman and her daughter, though not before he honors a final promise to Jun: the Obon lantern. Stripped of his protective gear, Murai makes a final desperate attempt. In this moment of raw vulnerability, when grief threatens to consume him entirely, it's Jun's memory that saves him. His son, who always looked to his father for protection, now protects him by replacing the gear. This act transforms Jun, who is no longer a ghost to chase, but a love to carry forward. When grief feels endless, we forget that carrying someone with us doesn't mean remaining in the spaces they've left behind. Murai's journey shows us that loving someone isn't about preserving what we've lost, but about learning to move forward with their memory held close. As he places the sea turtle lantern into the river, he's not letting go of Jun. He's learning to carry him differently, allowing their love to flow beyond the boundaries of the no-go zone and into a future where both father and son can find peace. The lantern's light won't fade. It'll just join countless others, each one proof that missing someone is just another way of keeping them alive. If you enjoyed this exploration of grief and memory through film, I'd appreciate you checking out some of my other topics. And when you're stuck understanding your own story, ditto. That's why I'm Pickle Ditto, because whatever storytelling pickle you're in, I've probably been there too.